Anyway, I have to introduce the event and the research project for the first 5 minutes. So, shall we go ahead?
Yep, you can stop whenever you want.
Okay. Hello, good morning, hola, namaste, and hello. Welcome to Resilient Maker Stories. I'm gonna start this session by sharing my screen with a short presentation about Resilient Maker Stories. Uh, Resilient Maker Stories. How do we cultivate a resilient, responsive, distributed design community? As an active partner for the Reservist project, FabLab Barcelona is organizing this chat series called Resilient Maker Stories. We will be inviting speakers from different parts of the globe to share their personal experiences and stories of responding to the moments of crisis. At this point, one may ask, what is distributed design? Emerging at the intersection of the makers movement and design sensibility, distributed design provides a framework for designers, makers, and creatives to innovate the field of design towards becoming more sustainable, open, and inclusive. At this point of the presentation, I would like to quote Enrico Bassi from his book Viral Design. All situations that occur on a global scale that are not met with effective responses in the industrial production system could be approached from the way we have seen distributed mobilization in the COVID-19 crisis. They could be the next testing ground for a synchronized international response from the global network. Our project, The Reservist, explores repurposing manufacturing lines for providing assistance with medical equipment and services in case of spiking market demands. This approach is to set up something called reservist cells, which in times of crises can be activated within 48 hours to switch to produce the necessary deliverables. This research project is also a collaboration with MDEF, Master in Design for Emergent Futures, which I'm an alumnus of. We've worked with activities like scenario and systems mapping using various research tools like Atlas of Weak Signals. Atlas of Weak Signals is a tool developed by Marina Quintero and FabLab Barcelona to envision future scenarios in different kinds of crisis and what could be the opportunities for innovation and social system innovations. So, hi, I'm Vikrant. Welcome to Resilient Maker Stories. For today's episode, I'm glad to have the opportunity to link Barcelona with its long lost train Goa. I'm very excited to bring in Makers Asylum today, also known as FabLab Goa. Makers Asylum is India's first community makerspace focused on fostering innovation through purpose based learning. They are a space working at the intersection of education and open innovation around social impact work. Vaibhav identifies himself as a mechanical engineer by training, a maker by passion, and an educator by choice. He's a Bachelor of Science from Boston University, a chair of innovation and entrepreneurship at Young Indians, and a global shaper at the World Economic Forum. Alongside Vaibhav, we have Richa. She is an electronics and communication engineer by academics and has a business degree in marketing, leadership, and strategy. She has spent over a decade of her professional career strategically enabling systems and ecosystems that use technology for daily problem solving. Vaibhav and Richa run Makers Asylum as Chief Learning Officer and Director. They believe that the future of learning is continuously evolving and makerspaces could and would be very significant in customizing these learning journeys for everyone. Welcome to Resilient Makers Stories. Vaibhav and Richa, did I miss anything? What would you like to add?
Oh, thank you very much. It's beautiful to be here. Thank you for having us.
Thank you,
Very glad
Vikrant.
to have you here. Do you want to introduce Makers Asylum and what's been going on with Makers Asylum recently?
Sure, Richa, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think you already covered a bunch in the introduction, so I don't have a lot to add. But like you said, we are a community makerspace. We started off back in 2013 out of a little garage, and over the years, we've really focused on building the community of makers in India through the various programs, educational intervention, plus also the open innovation interventions that we've been doing. Our focus going forward is to really build that open innovation ecosystem here where multiple stakeholders can come in together, experiment, learn, and actually find new ways of making and building stuff that is relevant to the community.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. Since this chat series is also about maker stories during times of crisis, I would like to start with discussing how India has been a very it has been a country which has had a very reputed medical ecosystem in many possible dimensions of healthcare. Even then, during the COVID global pandemic, situations did become quite gruesome. Do you guys want to tell us what was going on?
Sure. How would you like to do this? Would you like us to share photographs and take you through the story of the pandemic, or do you want to have a discussion?
For sure, whatever works best.
Sure. Richa, what do you think? Should we share some photos?
Yeah, why don't you talk about it and share a quick recap of that time, because I think Vikrant also has a bunch of other questions apart from just the pandemic.
Okay. So I'll just share this presentation very quickly. But again, it's more photographs and fun story rather. Or this is us. This is Makers Asylum. We're based out of Goa. So this is the place that Vikrant is talking about. It's a 100-year-old Portuguese house that we've now converted into a makerspace. I think it was always designed to be a makerspace. They just didn't know when they were making the house, but it works perfectly as one. This is what Richa was talking about. We started in a tiny little garage, 250 square feet in Mumbai, about 10 years back. And since then, we moved many spaces to get to where we are. It wasn't by choice that we moved. It was rather more that we kicked out of these spaces. And somehow or the other, we wanted to survive. We didn't have anything else better to do in our lives. So we always found ourselves in a bigger, more exciting space. And the community kept growing of Makers Asylum. 7 spaces now. And that's where we are. Moved around 7 times. This is all the stuff that Richa has talked about, but we have a wood shop, metal shop, digital fabrication lab, 3D printers, electronics lab, virtual reality lab, and people come to learn at the space. That's just some photographs and programs that we do. Moving on. Yeah, that's another program that Richa was talking about, like bring a lot of students to come to the space over the years. Getting to the pandemic story. Sorry, I'm just gonna skip a couple of these slides. Let's skip all of the pre-pandemic stuff. Let's get to the pandemic. Okay, so just like all the other spaces, Makers Asylum also had to shut down in the pandemic. Mm-hmm. When the initial issue started, 23rd of March, precisely, in Goa. Sorry, we were in Mumbai at this time. So we also had to shut down. And what we did, I guess, a little differently was that none of us went back home. And we decided to quarantine ourselves at Makers Asylum. Just a few people in the beginning, 3-4 of us, trying to think what we're going to do. One, it was, I guess, through inspiration of all the zombie movies we'd watched. It was apocalypse time. So it made sense to be around our tools, right? So we wanted to be around the tools, see how we can contribute at this time, at least be around them so that we can build and survive over here, whatever, better than being at home. That was the initial first thoughts. And then we started reading all the news and we realized there's a huge PPE shortage. And this was something that was prevalent around the world. And by the way, I have the copy of Viral Design, the book that you were talking about. Nicely talks about our face shield as well. So proud to be there. Anyways, we saw all of the issues happening in the beginning. So we said, how can we contribute? Can we make these over here? We started looking at a bunch of open source designs out there. Most of them were 3D printed, and we thought that 3D printing is quite slow. So can we make a laser cut design? And that's what we did. Mm-hmm. So we started prototyping. We made multiple prototypes, and very quickly, and we also went to a lot of doctors' houses at night to show it to them, to get some feedback from them and understand what was going on, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, what were they looking for. And we went through, during this time, we went through multiple design iterations, and I'll show you some of those. But once we hit upon a design that worked and doctors really wanted it, we started making them with the 3-4 of us inside the asylum. And we called volunteers to come to our space, and at the same time made a big target of 10,000 face shields. Now, 10,000 face shields is a big number if you think about it, especially with all the shops closed, no materials. You could not transport yourself or anything else. How do you make 10,000 face shields in a lab? I mean, this was a big question for us. We had no idea how we were going to do it. We were pretty scared at this time, but we still put that down. But what happened after that was really beautiful. Volunteers started popping in, and people from various backgrounds, some doctors, some filmmakers, some artists, some chefs, some musicians, people that didn't really have a job at this time and wanted to contribute. They started coming to the asylum and finding their way over there. And we quickly transformed Maker's Asylum into this little factory. That's what we did. It's a photograph from that time. And we went through 21 design iterations. I mean, this is a design talk, so this might be interesting. The first one was a paper prototype right at the bottom. Then the first prototype that we made after that was out of MDF. Obvious choice for people using laser cutters. I mean, first thing that comes to mind. But then MDF, we realized, is a very, very bad material for the ICUs, if you think about it, because it's completely porous, holds all the bacteria or the virus inside it, completely not allowed in the ICU. Very bad design. Bad material. So we quickly jumped to acrylic. Second choice at a makerspace for folks, right? So then we realized, hey, acrylic is heavy, too heavy on the head. The moment you drop it, it breaks. But doctors seem to love our design with acrylic as well. And if you see this blue one right here in the acrylic line that you see, there is some white stuff on the sides. Do you see that? There's some white marking. Let's see if I can annotate this stuff. This white column. These were the 2 points where these face shields were breaking. So after a little bit of use. So we knew this. We knew exactly where the face shield would break, the smallest points and everything, because we were making them and testing them. So what we did is we used some medical tape right there. So before we even sent it, we would put that on and send it to the doctors, because we knew it's going to break there, so that even if it breaks, it doesn't fall off. They can continue to use it. We made about 100, 200 of these before we moved on to the next design, which was much better. But just to show you, like, this was so quick. This was like within a day, we made 100 and sent it out. There was a requirement of 100, 200, and we would send it out. And the doctors were calling every day and asking for more face shields. That's when the aha moment came. And it's this face shield right here, this material over here. That was, I would say, the aha moment, because these were made out of a material called foam board or sunboard, commonly available in any prototyping shop or any stationery shop, rather, because it's commonly used for marketing, commonly used for various things in the industry and schools, everywhere. So this material was available everywhere. And that's why it made it so special. We took it to hospitals, and the ethical committees, they surveyed the material, they tested it, and they said that this material is waterproof, can work in those circumstances, and it had all the right things to be able to work at this point. So we said, perfect, this is something that we can scale. And it was cheap enough to be able to manufacture using a laser cutter at scale at this time. So we started making. We got making as many as we could, as fast as we could. Then there was the other problem. The supply chain was choked up. We had ambulances, police vehicles, everything parked outside of Maker's Asylum. And that's what we were using to transport these face shields. Because if you remember, they weren't regular transport, nothing working. Mumbai was like ghost town at this time. So how do we send these face shields now to other cities? How do we send these face shields now to other villages? How do we send these face shields now outside of Mumbai? That was the big question. So that's when it became really exciting. We started, we had always open sourced our design. So we started sharing all the files via GitHub. We started making videos of how to manufacture these inside your lab. We started making videos of how to keep yourself safe inside your lab while manufacturing these. started sharing all these tips and tricks with everyone in an open way. And then maybe Richa can talk about this because Richa was doing something really cool on the side. So while we were making these and converting Maker's Asylum into a factory, what Richa was doing was, Richa, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so at this point, actually, what we were trying to kind of really do is form like these self-sustainable local ecosystems where we were actually connecting like the maker, the design, the technology community to the laser cutting shops, because there was like a whole lot of laser cutting shops that are actually there in most parts of India, because a lot of them are there for marketing purposes, outdoor material. So these are like, it's a small industry that's kind of like actually there across India. And then we were also connecting them to funding bodies and the frontline workers, because we were getting a lot of information centrally, like because we had the campaign out, we were getting a lot of information around who needed how much, how many shields, when, where, and stuff like that. So what we were trying to do is sort of creating these local connections so that we don't have to like transport it from Bombay to like say a Calcutta or a Chennai, but like a local community over there could actually get funded and get connected to the hospitals and do this for them. So that's what we were trying to kind of like really build.
And what happened after that was beautiful. Every part of India, we had a lab, we had a laser cutting shop that was now part of the M19 initiative. Very quickly, 42 other cities, towns, and villages joined the force, and everyone from Vogue magazine to NDTV to BBC News, everyone started talking about it. So it became sort of viral in its own way. And people now had an easy way to join this movement and quickly start contributing. So we quickly started making these update videos and everything, and people joined. And then we went from 0 face shields to 1 million face shields in a matter of 49 days. To just put that into context, it took us the first 15 days to make the first million. The next million happened in the next 7 days. And towards the end,
not million, 100,000.
100,000. Sorry. And towards the end, we were making 100,000 face shields a day. And this is a little breakdown of the entire community, the way it was coming in. As you can see, the yellow flat line that's consistently that's Maker's Asylum since the beginning. And then around the 15th of March, just about maybe about 10 days into the initiative, more labs started joining us. And as we started sharing everything, and very quickly, what started happening was so beautiful that some of these labs were now faster and better at manufacturing than what we were. And some of these communities had more ideas and wanted to contribute in bigger ways. So there was a time when we were making more face shields when we were not making face shields. And that was beautiful. We were making more face shields, but when people were coming together and doing this as a collective, and that was very beautiful. There was a two-way street now. Just about around the end of March, I would say, we reached a point when we weren't just sharing knowledge and talking about how to make face shields, but now we were learning from the community and how to make our own face shields better and how to manufacture them faster. So the conversation went from a one-way conversation into a multi-way conversation. And that's the beauty of open source and a distributed network, right? A decentralized network, when you're not just contributing, but you're also learning from the entire system. So it became a system where collective intelligence was being shared with the community and people were learning from each other. And that was what was beautiful. And the most beautiful part of this was that we started receiving photographs from all across India of doctors, policemen, everyone wearing these face shields and really showing their appreciation and thanking us for what we did. And it was beautiful to be part of that. Once again, the entire group was completely interdisciplinary, people from all different backgrounds, musicians, artists, doctors, child specialists, chefs, filmmakers, people from all different backgrounds. The youngest member of the M19 collective was only 13 years old. and he was from this town called Bhatkal, and he made 344 face shields with his family there, which is beautiful. And went on to become a few case studies by Cambridge University and national one by OSMS, and now I think even MIT wrote one just recently on it. Okay, yeah, I can stop over there and we can have a few conversation, and then I can talk a little bit more about other stuff.
Yeah. Uh, I was actually one of the many lucky people who were able to be back at home during the times of crisis. And I remember being all the headlines being so stressful, and after a certain point, I was just not able to hear what was going on. But within all of those stories, there were also a few stories of hope. And if you put everything together in the context for what you did, 1 million face shields in 49 days within 42 cities, 20 labs, with many, many makers from 12-year-olds to grandpas. It's really crazy to see all of it come together. And all of this work under the M19 initiative is truly very, very impressive. It's very clear that you're making a real impact in the community and beyond. Since you also mentioned open source design, I just want to say I feel that open source design hasn't been the notable first thought when it comes to approaching the healthcare industry in India. Even then, the concept of shared learning and knowledge was a very interesting thing to see within your projects. It was quite refreshing to see scuba divers contribute to your research in Goa. How did the community and team came about that? Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure, Richa, you want to talk about this one? I can share the photographs if you like, if you want.
Yeah, for sure. Why don't you turn on the slides and I can give it a go.
Okay.
So, now
Okay.
the scuba divers came in the, I mean, of course, like you mentioned, right? Open source is not the most regular way of kind of like considering a project or even funding for that matter. So even in the first time when we were actually doing it, a lot of the funders and people who were funding different projects during the crisis were not really listening to what we wanted to say, because none of them wanted to fund something which was distributed in nature and which was open source in nature, right? So there were very few takers on that front. But then the second wave came in, and of course we also built like various other projects in the meantime. But we were still kind of like researching on the idea of oxygen, because in December 2020 we got to sort of read a report from open source medical supplies about how there could be a potential oxygen crisis in the future, because they were kind of like predicting that. And we wanted to really understand that. We started kind of like working on various researching open source oxygen concentrators as well at the time. And then what we realized is that a lot of them that were there that we were looking at were not manufacturing ready. And because oxygen concentrators is a much complex device than a face shield, and it's not just a primary healthcare device, it's also very serious because it's used in ICUs. It's also somebody's life can depends on it as well at times of where there's oxygen drop in their system. So we again started, we recollected the M19 collective, and we started doing open R&D around how we could like design something which was indigenous, locally available, with materials that were there. So that's when we started this whole next wave of our research and development around oxygen concentrators as well. And this is where the scuba divers actually came into play, because interestingly, Goa, where we are, is a beach town. And there are a lot of like these diving shops, and scuba divers on a daily basis kind of like work with, not of course, medical grade oxygen concentrators, but their entire system is kind of based on the PSA system as well. They're also like working with oxygen mostly. They have a very interesting technical and understanding of oxygen. So that was very exciting for us to kind of like involve them in the community and work on this whole research and development of the oxygen concentrator in Goa at that time. Yeah, Vaibhav, we're going to add something.
Yeah. If you think about it, specifically nitroxy diving, the way that's done is that you're removing the nitrogen or reducing the nitrogen in your tanks and increasing the amount of oxygen in your tanks. That's basically how you can go down and stay underwater for longer by reducing the nitrogen inside your tank. And the way they do that for dive shops is using a PSA system. They're using the same zeolite, but a much lower grade because they're not looking for 90% oxygen. They're looking for about 40% or 20 or 38% oxygen, somewhere over there. So they don't need such a high-end equipment, but they have a very similar setup where they're using a PSA-based system, the same zeolite, the same sort of material to be able to do this. So initially, when we were trying to understand how to make oxygen concentrators, we were a bit clueless. I mean, we never made oxygen concentrators before. So that's when I think one of the dive instructors in Goa, Anando, who lives in the same village as us, he showed up and he got us like all this material. He's like, here you go. He dumped it inside the shop and he's like, listen, this is how it works. And I was like, perfect. So Anul, me, everyone, we really got a lot of the initial understanding of how to build these and how they work, what's exactly the science behind it, what are the components, because we were trying to source all these components locally. So where to go, where to find these components, where do I find the zeolite, where do I find other things that I need? That's where I think the dive community really, really helped us in the beginning and was very integral to making these. And they were part of the entire build process. Yeah, then other labs were able to take it forward, but that's a different story. But yeah.
Like the scientific research and application, it is quite impressive. It makes me feel very proud to also kind of call myself a maker. But even in those terms, like how did it look from the point of accessibility and providing it to the common people where it was required?
The oxygen concentrators?
Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to an oxygen concentrator, our primary focus since day one, we were very sure that we're not going to actually make it and manufacture it. So that was not our motive behind it. Our motive was to share the knowledge with as many people as possible about how to make oxygen concentrators. So what we were looking at doing was creating an open source oxygen concentrator and sharing that knowledge with as many people. So what we went ahead and did was we certified our concentrator, did multiple tests on what is the output, what is the input, what is the electrical consumption, all of that. But we didn't get certified as a medical device. So we never actually certified M1902, our oxygen concentrator, as a medical device that can be given to patients. So technically, the M1902 has never been put on a patient before, till now. However, other manufacturers were able to take our designs, try and replicate it, and also go into manufacturing. That's the part that I was talking about right here, that other manufacturers were able to look at this R&D, try and recreate it, and then take it forward in different ways in different cities. This project was then, of course, it was funded by Cambridge University as one of the main funders. And the reason why they were funding us was not, again, to look at how these things can be manufactured or whatever. They were funding us from a thought process of how can a decentralized network of labs in a distributed way manufacture these and yet maintain quality assurance and quality checks, because that's the big problem that happens in a distributed network of labs, right? How do you maintain the same quality standards in all the labs? And that's a big question mark. So we didn't have the answer to that. We're still working, we're still learning. But while we were trying to figure that out, this is what happened in India. And this is where I think the M1902 or the entire research we did around oxygen concentrators really helped. There were almost about 300,000 oxygen concentrators that were imported into India overnight. There were chartered flights bringing oxygen concentrators. They didn't even know what they were bringing, but they were bringing something. There were seats, everything packed with oxygen concentrators that came to India. And then they started breaking down. And so many oxygen concentrators in hospitals and otherwise that arrived, they didn't even know what oxygen it was providing, how to use it, how to fix them, because they had electrical failures, they had breakage, so many things. So what we started doing was we started using the same community, activating them to repair and reuse and fix some of these oxygen concentrators. We managed to get a grant by EU, and we worked on doing repair camps, repair cafes across various parts of India and virtually, to be able to take the community of makers who contributed towards building oxygen concentrators to now creating these repair initiatives to fix them, because that's where we thought that we could pay a lot of attention and at the same time really contribute towards capacity building in terms of repairing and sharing that knowledge with more people. So that's one way that we contributed a lot in this way.
Yeah, since you mentioned this briefly, I would just like to mention that what we also have been noticing in our research and in other researches, that in the world post COVID-19, the contrast between the before and after situations of a crisis in terms of research and collaborations amongst makers and researchers, whether that comes in the form of budgeting, collaboration, or licensing. What do you think are the ways we could foster active collaboration without the need of having an ongoing crisis? I think repair cafes is a really great example of that, but what about fostering preparedness and creating crisis resilient systems?
Go ahead, Richa.
So, I mean, I think, obviously, the whole story of the maker movement coming together in the pandemic is a very powerful story of course, having almost, 20, 25 years of the whole movement taking shape in ways in multiple countries and, actually building that skill or capacity to actually respond to something like this in the way that everybody did. So I think we all need to keep that in mind, that the maker movement as a story and a powerful story at that, where it could become like a safety net for healthcare workers at the time, because there was nothing else, is not a matter of just the pandemic, but also 20, 25 years worth of history of what has happened in building that skill and building that community, right? And so I feel that going forward as well, that capacity building around making or even problem solving is something, and collaborative problem solving, because in India specifically, we're kind of designed to be in very competitive, IP driven kind of environment. I mean,
Yes.
even across the world. I mean, I think the maker community is just an exception where everyone wants to share and, build stuff together. But otherwise, I mean, if you're monetizing something or doing stuff like that, the traditional approach would be always to not share anything. And I think as a new way of kind of thought, and because the pandemic has given us that, kind of like that, time to think about it, I feel that the new way of thought that's emerging and should emerge is this collaborative, collective approach to problem solving. And I think there needs to be efforts from, of course, the maker community has always been kind of like at the forefront of, voicing that choice of collaboration and collective intelligence, or, and sharing and all of that kind of stuff. I think we need to build awareness around it to multiple stakeholders, which includes funders, which includes, industries as well, because that's where a lot of the things that happened during the pandemic did not work. And the same funding and the all the support could have gone to people who could collaboratively actually work faster, better, and even cheaper at that time. How when we think about frugal innovation and all of that. So I feel that there is a continuous need for building that capacity. And while the maker community and the design community and all of that stands at the forefront of it, we need to bring in more stakeholders together to actually think about how this new direction of innovation needs to happen, which is open, which is collaborative, and which can really build that local level resilience in the long term.
Yeah, I'm very glad you mentioned this, because I would also like to put an emphasis on the importance of awareness in modes of education at a very early scale. And I'm glad Makers Asylum is doing that with the SDG school. Can you tell us a little bit more about how do you envision the future of maker spaces and the school and the makers movement, and what role do you see Makers Asylum playing in that future, let's say like in next 5 or 10 years?
So I think when we started back in 2013, it was one of the first spaces in the country. There were a few other spaces that were popping up at the time. And I think for the longest time, till about the pandemic, we were not able to tell people what we really do because in India, typically one would, from a point of view of education as well, the engineering, the medicine, or whatever that we do is very like job oriented, survival kind of approach to life, right? And experimentation is not really encouraged or even thought about because, at the end of the day, obviously your basics need to be fulfilled before you kind of get to an experimental stage as well. So, of course, there's a whole shift now where we're seeing that there are government policies like the new education policy and other things which are embedding the whole agenda of creative learning as part of the education ecosystem itself, like from beginning. And we've been seeing a lot of interest in maker spaces at schools or universities. We get calls every day that, can you set up our maker space? Can you do something with the kids? So all of that is kind of like, really gradually taking shape. So we definitely feel that there is a lot of merit, and for the last decade as well as maker space, we've really tried to find collaborations with different kind of stakeholders to work in the context of how we can accelerate innovation and education in their capacities as well. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, as Makers Asylum, we see ourselves as enablers of open innovation and collaboration. For example, the SDG School is one of the programs that we do where we bring in youth, actually interdisciplinary people from all across the world to work on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, this is something that we've been doing since 2015 when the SDG goals came out. And the idea was to kind of create this community of youth to get activated towards actually feeling confident about solving larger problems, right? Because at the end of the day, we think about the SDGs, we think about sustainability, but when you go really deeper into understanding, the youth does not really respond to it on an individual level. So how do you really enforce or like bring in that confidence in that, that youth community to say that, hey, I can, use my skills and I can collaborate with somebody and I can also contribute to actually the larger planetary goals. So that's how we kind of started the program. And I think what we see ourselves doing is the same, like for the next 5-10 years, we really feel that it's an important piece that this open innovation ecosystem is nurtured further. And if we do it via our programs, collaborating with as many people from across the world, because now we work with youth in almost about 30 countries through our programs. So it's actually become a very global network as well. So how can we, keep adding to that interdisciplinarity, age agnostic, collaborative approach is what we want to keep doing actually as we go along. But Vaibhav, you could add if I've missed something.
No, that's perfect. What you mentioned, nicely summarized.
I feel there is like an urgent need of shifting perspectives in the education system because I think there are not many people who know that in many countries globally, the education system was actually adapted in 17th century from Germany's education system. So the entire goal of the education system was to create a pipeline of industry professionals, and the education system didn't really used to be so holistic and creativity driven. So I'm glad you're working on initiatives that is changing those perspectives and imbibing the sense of curiosity and problem solving in people of the current age. And on the same lines, how do you see individuals and organizations to get involved with Makers Asylum in supporting M19 initiative and other researches that are going on?
Vaibhav, do you want to talk a little bit, because it's also like a research design community? I would also think that maybe we can talk a little bit about like the open research platform a little bit, and then I can add to it with the other ways in which other stakeholders have been working so far.
Okay, fair. So one thing that we see is that, of course, looking at contributing towards the programs, that's one straightforward way that we see a lot of collaborations happening, which is that we're working with a lot of universities and across in different parts of the world and organizations to sort of share this mindset and create that maker mindset with them. So that's one thing that is happening. The other thing that we're doing now is we wanted to once again show you this part. This is the last bit on my presentation anyways, so Perfect. Uh, ah, so what we realize is that if you think about open source and if you think about sharing, then one second, let me just get to the spot. There. How do we use this open R&D network? What happened during the pandemic to solve other big problems? And over here, this is, I think, how the R&D is happening currently. If you think about it, innovation happens either in governments, universities, corporations, or startups. There is no way for citizens to contribute towards innovation. This is a typical academic R&D process, and this has been put together by Anshuman. He's a postdoc at MIT Media Labs and a great friend, and he's been working with him to look at how we can look at the M19 initiative for many other problem statements around India, and how can we involve the citizens and the youth, part of the maker communities or otherwise, to start actually contributing and building together, whether physically or not. So this is what we looked at is the current drawback that if you think about it, innovation is largely limited to university and some corporations. There is nothing happening when it comes to public or community collaborations. Research in funding is driven only by grants and publishing findings, but primarily focus in the academic area again. And once published, most publishing houses have paywalls charging for knowledge. Researchers might be aware of this. Even many recently, there was a nice case study written about Makers Asylum and the entire pandemic stuff by researchers at MIT. And we can't even read that because we need to pay to read it. Extremely long cycle of innovation in the process. So what we're trying to do is, can we look at taking away the bottlenecks, which is one is the patents and IP barriers, because in an open structure, can we involve more community and innovators and researchers to all collaborate towards problem solving? A lack of structural approach to problem solving, and then there is lack of domain experts. So this is what we're doing now. We're looking at simple problems that we can tackle, and we don't need the same attention as the COVID-19 crisis to bring people together. We don't want to, even if we can bring like 10% of that kind of attention or 10% of that and make smaller communities focus on specific problems, that's great. That's perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. To be able to create smaller communities that have a purpose towards solving a certain problem or working in a certain space, collecting large sets of data over there that can be done through open sourcing, can be done through creating community-led initiatives. And this could really help in the open R&D process is what we feel. Making less IP barriers between people and once again, creating a more community-led approach, easily replicable solutions. That's one more important thing, that whatever we find, it needs to be easy enough so that more communities can find. Just like the M19 initiative, a 12-year-old could go ahead and make 344 shields. Can we have a 12-year-old or young students contribute by collecting, let's say, 50 samples of soil in their neighborhood, but done in a right way that can contribute towards figuring out, let's say, the soil moisture or the soil pollution across India. And there's very lack of data and things like this right now. And can we use that to actually involve an open community of people to participate in such sort of innovation? That's what we're trying to look at the moment. And we'd love for organizations, supporters, people, universities to get involved, and at the same time, work with us to work with these communities and citizen-led innovation, I would say, because we do have a community of makers that has contributed over the last couple of years. Now, can we work with them on such simpler projects and involve them to collect that kind of data and work with them? Yeah.
It's been an amazing journey to see you do all of this, especially to see you just think and solve problems so holistically. There's always obviously so much to learn, so much to make, and so much to repair. And it's been a pleasure to hear so much from you. I would like to transition this into concluding this conversation. Would you want to share any concluding thoughts with the audience who have joined us today from different parts of the globe?
Richa, do you have any first thoughts?
No, I think it's very important that like the maker community gets together more often, does more things together as well to kind of keep that action alive. I think the pandemic was, the time when we saw everybody really in action. And now I think everyone's also gone back to kind of like doing their own things and figuring out life, I think. But these kind of interactions give us a lot of energy to take back because it's very exciting to kind of like of course, share our story, but at the same time also hear from others as to what they're up to. So I think that active involvement with the global maker community, with each other, is going to drive a lot more change, is what I feel. And it's super nice to kind of like see everyone join in and listen today. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And also everyone, it's so beautiful. Like Richa said, it's beautiful to have everyone together. More such collaborations and conversations would really spin around a lot of new ideas and projects. So thank you, Richa, for that shot. And apart from that as well, I feel like everyone should start making and start somewhere. Because with this story as well that we wanted to share, we started with one face shield, but made 1 million. But everyone needs to start somewhere. So I think there's always communities out there. There are always folks in every country, every town, every village. So if we start somewhere, there's always people that we can pull together and make it into more exciting things. So thank you once again.
It's been a pleasure to have you, Vaibhav and Richa. We'll definitely find more ways to connect makers and you to the rest of the community. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vikrant, for having us.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.